The Dollmaker'S Secret. The Forgotten Workshop. In a quiet corner of the old town of Marlwood, nestled between crooked cobblestone streets and shrouded by ancient oaks, stood a small, forgotten workshop. Though the windows were fogged with age and dust, hints of delicate figures were visible inside, a subtle movement that, if watched long enough, seemed to be almost alive. The workshop belonged to Josephine Moreau, the town's dollmaker, known for crafting dolls so intricate, so hauntingly lifelike, they seemed to contain pieces of souls themselves. Josephine had been absent for months, and yet, the dolls in her shop remained untouched and oddly watchful. The townspeople, many of whom had bought dolls from her over the years, whispered that Josephine's dolls had secrets, that they contained some part of the dollmaker's own dark history. Some even claimed to have seen her creations shift in the night, their glassy eyes tracking movements with unnerving precision. The townsfolk avoided the workshop after dark, but for 3 children, friends since childhood, the rumors were too tantalizing to resist. It was early October when Oliver, the ringleader, proposed they explore Josephine's workshop. His 2 friends, Ada and Eli, exchanged uneasy glances. "But everyone says her dolls are strange," Ada murmured, her eyes wide with apprehension. "They say Josephine cursed them." "Those are just stories," Oliver scoffed, though a trace of hesitation flickered across his face. "Besides, we're just looking around." They waited until the town clock struck midnight, its deep chimes echoing down the deserted streets. Shadows danced as they slipped through the mist, approaching the locked door of the workshop. To their surprise, it creaked open with a simple push, revealing the dimly lit interior, where rows upon rows of dolls sat on shelves, staring, waiting. As they stepped into the workshop, the children felt an unnatural chill settle over them. The air was heavy, thick with the scent of dust and old wood, but as they moved deeper into the room, the dolls' eyes, glossy, dark, and disturbingly attentive, followed their every step. Eli pointed to one doll in particular, perched on a shelf by itself. Its face was remarkably detailed, with skin that seemed almost human. A small inscription was engraved on its wrist, "To my beloved." "What is that?" Ada whispered, reaching out, but as she did, the doll's hand seemed to twitch. The children gasped, retreating a few steps, but curiosity overpowered their fear, and Oliver plucked up the courage to grab the doll, determined to get to the bottom of its mystery. The doll was heavier than expected, its expression shifting subtly as he held it, almost as if it were aware. I think we should leave," Ada stammered, pulling at Oliver's sleeve. But Oliver ignored her, drawn by something he couldn't name. In his hand, the doll seemed to grow colder, and a soft, eerie whisper filled his mind. "Help me." After their unsettling experience, the children left the workshop in a hurry, but Oliver was changed. He couldn't shake the feeling that the doll was speaking to him. In the days that followed, he began having strange dreams, seeing visions of Josephine working late into the night, her hands shaping doll after doll, each with a face he somehow recognized. He confided in Ada and Eli, who were horrified to hear of the dreams. Determined to get answers, they returned to the workshop a week later. This time during the day, they discovered a hidden door behind one of the shelves, leading down a narrow staircase. As they descended, the air grew colder, and they felt as if they were being watched. At the bottom was a room filled with countless dolls, each more lifelike than the last. Oliver realized with a sinking dread that these weren't just dolls, they were somehow alive, containing echoes of souls, trapped in silence. In the far corner of the room, a journal lay on a workbench. Flipping through its pages, the children uncovered Josephine's twisted secret. She had made a deal with a dark entity to transfer the souls of townspeople into her dolls, a pact that promised eternal life, though at a terrible cost. The last entry, scrawled in a frantic hand, read, "The dolls are no longer mine, they belong to him now." Suddenly, the door above them slammed shut, trapping them in the room. The dolls began to move, their eyes shining with a sinister light. Oliver, Ada, and Eli backed into a corner, terrified as the dolls rose from their perches, surrounding them. "Josephine made us," one doll whispered, its voice soft yet menacing, "and now, you belong to us." The children struggled to find a way out, but the dolls grew more menacing, their eyes flashing with an eerie, otherworldly glow. A doll bearing an uncanny resemblance to Eli's late grandfather advanced toward him, reaching out with cold, lifeless hands. "Please, don't do this," Ada cried, but the dolls continued, their voices filling the room with a chilling chant. "Eternal life, eternal pain." In a desperate attempt to break free, Oliver grabbed a nearby lantern, swinging it at the dolls. The flames caught on the hem of a doll's dress, spreading quickly. Smoke filled the air as the children ran, ducking under shelves and scrambling up the stairs, their hearts pounding. They burst out of the workshop just as it was engulfed in flames, but as they turned to watch the building burn, a haunting laughter echoed behind them, seeming to come from every corner of the street. Though they had escaped the workshop, they felt the weight of Josephine's curse following them. That night, each child dreamt of the dolls, hearing the soft whispers of trapped souls, begging for release. Days turned to weeks, and life returned to normal, or so they thought. Strange occurrences began haunting their every move. Dolls appeared in places they hadn't left them, and at night, they heard faint whispers, promises of eternal life, eternal pain. Their friends and family dismissed the events as childish imagination, but Oliver, Ada, and Eli knew better. The Dollmaker's curse was far from broken, and as the full moon rose one October evening, the children noticed something chilling: 3 dolls on their doorstep, lifelike as ever, waiting in silence. The curse had only just begun. After the haunting night of the dolls' arrival on their doorstep, Ada took the first doll home. It was a small doll with old-fashioned clothes and a soft, innocent face. She hesitated, but her family assured her it was just a toy, harmless and quaint. But that night, Ada would discover the truth. In the quiet hours, Ada began hearing the faint sound of waves and gulls, as if the seaside was inside her bedroom. She saw the doll's eyes glimmering in the dim light, its face somehow damp, its dress stained with what looked like seawater. The scent of salt filled the room. One night, Ada dreamt of the doll speaking, whispering stories of drowning, of the frigid depths, and of a fisherman's daughter who never returned home. When she awoke, her room was wet, the doll seated by her pillow, eyes glistening with saltwater tears. The haunting deepened when Ada's own dreams shifted from mere visions to experiencing the suffocation of drowning. Night after night, she would awaken gasping, clutching her throat, the doll somehow closer to her bed each morning. She tried to burn the doll, but found it mysteriously intact on her nightstand hours later. The fisherman's daughter was relentless, whispering, "Save me," her voice carrying a deadly lure. Eli took the second doll, a stern-faced soldier dressed in a miniature uniform, one hand sculpted in a perfect salute. At first, Eli dismissed the doll as harmless, merely a relic, but soon, the doll's presence grew sinister. The doll's eyes would gleam at dusk, reflecting shadows that seemed to move independently. Eli started hearing marching boots in his room, the sound of commands whispered from an unseen captain. By the third night, Eli saw faint figures in military uniforms, flickering in and out like smoke around the soldier doll. Every night, he would dream of betrayal, of the soldier in his arms, blood seeping through his uniform. The soldier, who died alone, betrayed by comrades, seemed to haunt Eli with an accusation that was becoming a personal vendetta. The doll's expression twisted with hate, and Eli's dreams morphed into nightmares, where he was the betrayer, cursed to live with the guilt for all eternity. Oliver took home the final doll. Its face was hauntingly similar to Josephine's own: thin lips, arched brows, eyes holding secrets of the abyss. The doll's dress was finely crafted, embroidered with thread that shimmered with an almost otherworldly gleam. Oliver soon became consumed by the doll's haunting eyes, which seemed to pull him into a trance every time he looked. He started seeing Josephine's face in the mirror, her eyes boring into his soul, a wicked smile twisting her lips. "You will make the final doll," her voice echoed in his mind, "my masterpiece." Oliver's mind deteriorated as he spent days locked in his room, carving figures he couldn't remember making. He began to see his own reflection becoming distorted, his face taking on features that weren't his own: gaunt cheekbones, hollow eyes, an expression of dread that mirrored Josephine's last moments. When Oliver's friends visited, they found him pale and thin, mumbling about the masterpiece that Josephine demanded of him. They knew that if he completed this final doll, the curse would be unleashed in its full horror. The three friends reunited, desperate to break free from the doll's hold. but each cursed figure grew more relentless, as if bound by some unholy tether to their souls. The dolls moved on their own, whispering secrets they could not ignore, each one drawing their host deeper into madness. Determined to end it, they returned to the ruins of Josephine's workshop, bringing each doll with them. As they laid the cursed figures in a circle and chanted the words from Josephine's journal, the dolls' voices rose in agony, the final echoes of cursed souls. Shadows emerged, flickering like lost spirits, their figures merging into a dark vortex that seemed to consume the dolls, one by one. But as the last doll disappeared into the shadows, the children heard Josephine's final words, chilling in the silent workshop. "You are the final dolls now, eternal life, eternal pain." The curse had found new vessels. After the children had gathered courage and burned the final doll in hopes of breaking the curse, they felt a fleeting sense of relief, but that night, as the moon cast an eerie glow over their rooms, each child was jolted awake by a familiar sound, a soft, raspy voice, whispering from the shadows. There, perched on their nightstands, sat the very same doll they had burned, untouched and whole, its eyes gleaming with a malevolent light. The doll leaned forward, its tiny painted lips parting in a crooked smile as it gave them its demands. The first demand: bring me the locket of your dearest friend. The doll's voice was barely a whisper, like a faint scratching in their ears, yet they couldn't ignore it. Each child felt the doll's gaze bore into them as it spoke again. "Bring it by midnight, or I will come to take it myself." They trembled, knowing that the locket was special, something dear to them, but something about the doll's demand seemed to pull at them, as if they were compelled to obey, no matter the fear it struck in their hearts. The second demand: take a piece of hair from your sleeping parent. The children recoiled at the thought, yet as they looked into the doll's eyes, they felt as if they had no choice. The voice echoed, "Without it, the darkness will grow. I need a piece of them." The demand sent chills through them. They couldn't imagine creeping into their parents' room, scissors in hand, to steal something so personal. The dread felt like a weight pressing upon them, and even as they tried to refuse, the doll's eyes grew sharper, its grin widening. The third demand: bury a candle at the entrance to your home. The doll's final demand was the most sinister. It explained in its raspy tone, "At midnight, take a black candle and bury it under the soil. It will seal you to my world." They realized that the candle wasn't just an item but a piece of the doll's own dark magic. To place it near their home was to tether their spirits to its evil forever. Torn between fear and an overwhelming compulsion, they gathered in secret, speaking in hushed voices about the doll's commands. But they couldn't go through with it. Terrified and confused, the children went to their parents, revealing the doll's terrifying reappearance and its sinister demands. Their parents were horrified, immediately sensing that this was more than just childish imagination. They remembered the dark tales surrounding Josephine the dollmaker and the rumors of her cursed creations. Realizing their children had fallen under a deadly enchantment, they knew they had to find a way to break the curse once and for all. The children's whispered confession sent chills through their parents. Fear tightened its grip as they recalled the sinister stories of Josephine, the dollmaker. She was known for her eerie skill in creating dolls that seemed to hold fragments of life itself, and the old folktales had suggested that each doll was bound by a curse, one that grew darker with time. Yet the family had never believed the stories until now. The parents gathered everyone in the living room, the children clutching their hands tightly, afraid to let go. They could almost feel the presence of something sinister lurking in the corners, waiting. As the children shared every chilling detail of the doll's demands, the parents understood that they needed help, but from whom? Desperate, they turned to the oldest family member they knew, Grandma Lila, who lived on the outskirts of town. She had been there when the dollmaker's shop was still open, and the townsfolk whispered about her strange connection to Josephine. Reluctant but willing to do anything to protect her grandchildren, Lila agreed to reveal what she knew. Lila pulled a tattered, leather-bound journal from her attic, its pages brittle and faded. It was Josephine's diary, a record of her madness and the dark secrets she had sewn into each of her creations. They read in a hushed silence, each page revealing pieces of Josephine's twisted obsession with life and death. One passage stood out. Each doll must carry a soul, borrowed, trapped, and tied to the wooden heart within. only then will it have eyes to see and ears to hear. A doll without a soul is but an empty vessel. The family shuddered as they realized the truth. Each of the dollmaker's creations required a fragment of the human spirit, bound in rituals they could barely comprehend. The dolls were no longer just toys but dark, unnatural extensions of Josephine herself. The horror deepened that night. Unable to sleep, the children stayed awake, only to find themselves drawn to the eerie sound of soft, rhythmic scratching. It was the burned doll, sitting in the corner, its eyes glistening, and whispering in a language they could not understand. The scratching grew louder, more insistent, as if begging them to listen. One of the children, in a trance-like state, walked toward it, reaching out as if in a dream. The doll's grin widened, and just as her fingers brushed its tiny wooden hand, a searing vision filled her mind. She saw a room with walls covered in ancient symbols, blood-stained dolls hanging from the ceiling, and Josephine standing in the middle, whispering curses under her breath. She woke from the vision with a scream, pulling the entire family into her panic. The message was clear: the doll was trying to lead them somewhere. Following the doll's clues, the family braved the old, decrepit workshop that Josephine had once called home. Dust covered every surface, and an unnatural chill clung to the air. Dolls with cracked porcelain faces lined the walls, their glassy eyes reflecting shadows that seemed to move on their own. In the far corner, hidden beneath layers of cobwebs, they discovered a concealed trapdoor. Fear gripped them as they descended into the darkness, clutching only a flickering lantern that cast eerie shadows on the stone walls. The air was thick and suffocating, carrying the faint smell of wax and decay. The basement walls were covered in symbols identical to the ones in the child's vision, carved deeply into the stone as though to seal something ancient within. And there, in the center, was a pedestal with an unlit candle, black as night and inscribed with Josephine's initials. The journal had hinted at a way to break the curse but was maddeningly vague, implying that only a show of immense courage could defeat Josephine's spirit. But what would that mean for them? Were they expected to challenge the doll itself? Just then, the doll that had haunted the children appeared at the edge of the room, grinning with a twisted glee. Its eyes flickered, almost mocking them, daring them to approach. The father took a shaky step forward, his voice barely steady as he addressed the doll. He felt foolish talking to a toy, yet the darkness around it seemed alive, pulsing with malevolence. Suddenly, the doll spoke in Josephine's voice: "Only a sacrifice can set them free. The life of one will bind the curse forever." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. They looked at one another in horror, realizing the terrible choice before them. Unable to accept such a fate, they decided to confront the curse itself, hoping to outwit the dark magic. They lit the black candle, reciting words from the journal to counter the curse, their voices echoing in the small, dim room. Shadows seemed to shrink and writhe as if resisting their chants, and a terrible wind howled, carrying Josephine's laughter through the workshop. Just as they felt the curse weakening, the doll lunged at them with an unnatural speed, its tiny hands clawing and tearing. Each family member struggled against the curse's physical and mental grip, feeling as though their very souls were being pulled from their bodies. They fought through the terror, their voices growing louder, overpowering Josephine's sinister whispers. Finally, with a blinding flash, the doll shattered into pieces, and the candle's flame extinguished, casting them into a heavy silence. Exhausted, the family scrambled back up the stairs and into the night, collapsing outside the workshop. But as they stumbled away, they heard a faint sound behind them, a doll's laughter drifting on the wind. Their hearts raced as they saw a shadow move inside the workshop, Josephine's face appearing briefly in the broken window, her eyes glinting with malice. The curse was broken, but her spirit remained bound to the house, waiting for the next unsuspecting soul to wander in. The family fled back home, haunted by the knowledge that some evils could never truly be vanquished, only contained. Months passed, and the family did everything to move on, but the memories never faded. One night, as they gathered around the dinner table, a soft, familiar scratching sound echoed from the hallway. They froze, glancing at each other with wide, terrified eyes. When they finally mustered the courage to investigate, they found nothing. No doll, no shadow, only the echo of a curse that would forever haunt them.